What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman. We're back here for Against the Blitz, episode 14 with Austin, Football with Oz, and another very special guest for the second iteration of the what I'm going to spontaneously call the Rebuild versus Reload series instead of the how to rebuild that we were kind of originally going with. So I just kind of dropped that on Austin right now. I was going to.
Yeah, I like it though.
I forgot. So
yeah, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So we're going to go with that. And for iteration 2, we're going to be covering the San Francisco 49ers. And we are very pleased to have on Karan. He's been a follow of mine for quite a while on Twitter. He's done analytical work. He's produced these player cards that I think were a pretty popular thing going around at the time he started them, especially. So he's done some very good work, and we're excited to have him on. So, Karan, introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be on. Been looking at your guys' stuff these last few days, and it's really impressive. But yeah, I used to write about football, a lot of college football, draft analysis. Now I do the player cards, which are inspired by the hockey. JFresh Hockey does a similar thing. And yeah, I like to look at the game from both the film perspective and analytics perspective. I think we get both sides. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, you can find all of his social medias will be down in the description, so highly recommend you go check him out. And I'm glad you mentioned Jay Fresh because I'm a big hockey fan too. And
yeah, he's go.
Yeah, so that guy's work is crazy too. So that's really cool. You got inspiration from that. But yeah, the 49ers. There's a lot more on this plate than I anticipated. Austin and I were talking about it pregame, and there's a ton here. So we might as well start with the biggest headline, and I'm interested to see where this goes in terms of opinion. Brock Purdy, the extension looming. Is he worth an extension? Is he worth what the rumored extension could look like? What are we feeling like? We'll start with you, Austin.
I mean, it depends what that dollar amount looks like, right? Like, I would love to bring Brock Purdy back to the Bay Area, but like if that number starts with a 5, I don't know. I love Brock Purdy, but man, like seeing the other teams that pay these quarterbacks $50 million when they're not like top 5 quarterbacks, it kind of hurts the way that the rest of the team is getting built, in which we can kind of see it kind of seems like they're having to say goodbye to a lot more free agents than they normally would have to with the extension looming. So I would love to bring back Brock Purdy for a pretty reasonable price, but I think just around the under 50 million spot would be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at, obviously, Purdy probably isn't based on his production. Well, production would say he is worth the money, but you could argue his talent level and his ceiling. A lot of people would say that's not worth 50 million plus, right? But realistically, all the quarterbacks that are better than Brock Purdy, I think we can agree he's a top 10 to 15 quarterback in the league. Are any of those guys available? Not really. Right? These next few drafts, right? This draft out to the quarterback class is pretty weak, right? I could see none of these guys really being starters. So, but when it comes down to it, I think you kind of have to pay Brock just because you can't do better. And he's 24, I believe. He might have just turned 25. Production's been great. You've seen it last year. He's an MVP level quarterback. I don't really see how they don't pay him.
Yeah,
100%.
So I'm gonna out myself early because we have a 49er fan here, and I'm not gonna call myself a hater, but I do think I've found myself more leaning toward that side of the spectrum throughout the course of his career so far, and it's not intentional. I tend to find myself like hating on guys that I feel like get more credit than I think they deserve. I did it with Joe Burrow very early in his career too, and obviously that's gone south for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna say that right off the bat. But with that said, I do feel like Brock is a guy that they're, to Karan's point, they're going to pay. They probably have to pay. This is a team with a track record, especially under Kyle Shanahan, that has not had much luck finding their guy, or at least a guy that everyone collectively feels confident in. They tried to go for Trey Lance, and they just, kind of lucked their way into Brock to begin with. So, they feel like they have their guy. They want to do right by their guy, and I think they are going to be more hesitant to try and explore, even if I personally feel like that might be the better option. And I saw, even like looking at some projections, David Lombardi is throwing out like 5 years for 61.
I wouldn't listen to that
like,
guy.
yeah, I read that. I'm like, this guy's out of his mind. But I also saw Jason from Over the Cap. I think he was on My Sports Update, or Ari, I think his name is, his podcast, I think, and he even said that number was possible, and they might go that length. And I mean, I was ready to like gag myself.
Yeah, I mean, the details of the contract, it's going to be a ridiculous number. I don't think it'll be nearly as high as some people are saying. Like, he's eligible for a lot of money. I think it'll kind of land in between. But the question I've consistently asked a lot of like Purdy skeptics, and a lot of them are Niners fans, right? There's a lot of Niners fans who think he's Jimmy Garoppolo 2.0, right?
Oh,
Brian Hoyer. No, well, not Brian Hoyer, right? But they make all these comparisons, like these guys are going to get Nick Mullins. Right? So I'm consistently asked, what's the pathway if you do let Brock Purdy walk, right? You trade him, let's say. What's the path? Because you go sign Sam Darnold. Is that the option? We just had him on the roster 2 years ago. You didn't beat out Purdy. You beat out Trey Lance. You didn't beat out Brock Purdy, right? You bring in Aaron Rodgers, who wasn't that good last year, is probably going to retire next offseason, right? So where do you go from there?
Yeah, Nick, and it was a good point to what you said earlier, where like even if it could possibly be an overpay, it's out of absolute necessity because there just aren't other quarterbacks available. Like this draft class and free agency class are like, the free agency class is bad. Like you said, Darnold's by far the best one, and you already had him, and he wasn't the start. And then the draft class isn't really much better. So like, if it feels like
there's a lot of Niners fans who want to draft Jackson Dart's the popular name. I just don't see. He's not very good, and he wouldn't be a good scheme fit. Neither would Shadur, and Cam Ward certainly wouldn't.
Right. And like it feels like a lot of the guys that they've brought in recently, like the Ricky Pearsalls of the world, like there's a good young nucleus to this team still, even with all the veterans on the team. So like I think like you can get away with paying Purdy around that $50 million mark if that's going to be it. And I think that you can still keep a good squad around him. Like I'm not too concerned about it, especially with just how bad the free agent market is for quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certain players. Trent Williams is going to age out soon. He won't be on the payroll. Kittle's getting up there. He's on the other side of 30, right? So guys will start to ease themselves out, end up on cheaper contracts or retired. I think it'll work out for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Niners are rightfully feeling pressured into this payment, and I say that in a positive way. Like they're not looking at this like, oh man, we have to pay this guy and we don't want to. They certainly want to. He's been the best quarterback that they've had. Even Jimmy at his peak, he's far better than Jimmy ever was.
Yes.
So it really is a matter of, to me, I get why they have to. I think for a fan's perspective, we kind of touched on this in our first episode when we had a couple of our other guests on. Yeah. I look at it from a perspective of someone that might not have their job on the line, or that doesn't necessarily have to perform next year, and I can go lazy, lackadaisical at a quarterback position and go 6-11 or whatever it is now, 17 games, and be okay with it. But a guy like Kyle Shanahan, who rightfully, wrongfully, however you view it, has been under fire. Especially, I feel like Niners fans hate that guy for some reason.
It's all greatly exaggerated. I mean, every year we end up like week 8, week 9, we'll fire Shanahan, and then it just goes away. Right? I feel like there's a middle ground. He's got at least 3 years left, realistically. I mean, you thought like we're a year removed from Brock Purdy. They went to the Super Bowl. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Possibly could have won MVP if it weren't for the Christmas game against Baltimore.
Oh my God. How about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, this year wasn't great. Brock, he started off fine. Just he was uncharacteristically bad at the end, very inaccurate, and he struggled with the shoulder injury at the end as well. Missed the game against the Packers. So, I don't know. I think you go into this year, if they have 2 bad years in a row, which really hasn't happened since 2017, 2018, you can start to have some conversations. But I don't think Shanahan's on the hot seat. Yeah.
No. I don't think he should be. I mean, with how close he seems to get every single year, I'm not going to punish someone just for not winning. Like the whole point of having a coach is to get your team as successful as possible. And he's putting them in fantastic positions to win all the time. And they just come up slightly short a few times. So no, I'm not going to like be panicking and saying that Shanahan needs to go when there's like not really any better options available.
Yeah, it's the same debate. Like,
Yeah.
you can't replace Shanahan's much better at his job than Purdy is, but neither of them are really replaceable at this point in time, and probably not for the near future.
No, and like I love them bringing back Saleh to kind of bring back. It's like I think that he possesses something that Shanahan doesn't. And I think that they're going to work perfectly together. And they did before. So yeah, I'm actually really stoked about where that's going to be going forward.
Yeah, and I think Saleh, the way it was before as well, he kind of serves as a head coach of the defense. He has full control there. Whereas a guy like Steve Wilkes, a guy like Nick Sorensen, those guys, well, they did lead the defense. They really weren't in charge, especially Nick Sorensen, who basically Brandon Staley may as well have been the defensive coordinator there. Like he was the sideline guy, but he wasn't really calling the shots.
Oh, yeah.
Well, before we move off of Brock, because there are a couple when it comes to coaching changes that I wanted to touch on too. I do think, just wrapping up the extension portion, he'll probably end up. It depends, because I also read that his agency, this is like the agency's Super Bowl, if you will, like Brock's contract is. So they're going to try and really do him right to kind of, hopefully land future clients. So I think they're going to try and push for the best they can get. And I think my ballpark, after reading David's outlandish projection and then seeing some other, I felt like low ballish projections. Like I actually do think he clears 50 pretty easily. I think he ends up 55, 56 is probably my final for 4 years. I think his agency is going to try and make it 4 years instead of 5. I've been seeing 5 years being the big number, but I think 4 years will be end up being where that ends up.
I think 55 realistically is around the range it'll be. It won't be 60, it won't be 50. 50 is too low. But I think the number you're seeing Lombardi post is probably what they're trying to start with. Not typically how it goes with the Niners. That's like the starting bid, but it'll come down.
Yeah. But my last question, kind of, for Brock, and this is where my skepticism comes in. And I was actually listening to Locked On Niners earlier today. And my first time listening to them, I had mixed emotions. But nonetheless, I think it was, oh man, who's the former NFL guy they got on there?
Eric Crocker.
Eric Crocker.
I don't know if he's still on it, but he was on it for a long time.
He is.
Yeah.
And he was asking a question that I think he wanted to ask, but he knew he was on a 49er podcast, so he wanted to be careful. He was basically asking, like, have we seen the best version of Brock Purdy yet? And if we have, how can you feel right paying him an extension when he's only 25? If you feel like you've already seen the best version, or at least near the best version of Brock at this young of an age, can you justify paying somebody that you feel like has hit his ceiling?
I mean, so I was actually like privately doing my own research the other day about kind of when is the premium age for a quarterback. And pretty much every single person hits their best from ages 27 to about 32. And for him, like, he's not someone that really relies on his athleticism. He uses it, but like he's a good enough processor, good enough accurately to where, like, I feel like he still has 3-4 years until he's actually going to hit his peak. So I think that an extension at like age 24, 25 is the entire perfect age to pay someone that kind of money when I don't think he even has hit his peak yet.
Yeah, in terms as a player, right, I think this year was very interesting for Brock. He was much more mobile. He was much more elusive. He was escaping plays much more than he was the year before and the year before that. It also looked like a different player because he wasn't nearly as accurate, right? He struggled with that throughout the whole season, but in terms of he's gaining tons of yards on his legs, right? He's one of the quickest players one of the quickest quarterbacks in the NFL in terms of 10-yard split. That's been a big thing with him. So I think if you can put together the good pieces of this year and the good pieces of the year before, you can get a whole different player with Brock, right? I'm not sure he'll get much better to the point where he takes another jump, but I think his best season's probably in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hope so. It just was an interesting way to kind of put things into perspective, because for a guy that was drafted where he was without any expectation, getting put in a position, ending up on a potential Super Bowl winning team and being a big part of that, and being able to lead a team as far as he did when he was the full-time starter, that whole bit, and he was great for what they needed him to be in that process. So it's like knowing the athlete he is, already being in that prime, how much, like, once he gets to that 29, 30 years old, range, that quickness might decrease. And then if he's not getting quicker as a processor and he's getting less athletic, then I think that's where, and granted, that would be at the end of this version of this first extension anyway, but it was an interesting question because 25 is not old for a quarterback by any stretch. I feel like he's
not even close.
I feel like he's reached somewhat close to his peak already. That to me was a concerning thing. Just how he feels.
There's actually like a rookie quarterback in like Tyler Shuck that is 26 years old going into this year's class. So like 25, I'm not gonna like overreact if someone's not really like at their peak at 25 yet. Like I was saying before, like all the stars from like I did 1998 to current. Anybody that's been a Pro Bowler hits their peak from like 27 to 32. So like and that's going to take up like all of his contract time, which is like which is perfect. So yeah, I'd say this is like the actual perfect time to extend him. I'm actually excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see with his health as well. He's gotten banged up a few times. Back at his rookie year against the Eagles, really messed up his shoulder. He missed that whole offseason. So, but as long as he stays healthy, right? He's 25 now. I don't see. I'm one of those people. I don't believe that progression is linear with a lot of these players, right? A lot of them just kind of stall out. But I think Purdy will get marginally better over the next few years. And if he's playing at the level he was playing in 2023, I'm not mad at that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a skeptic. I'm sorry. I just can't help myself.
It was the same thing to Joe Burrow too. So you know what?
All right,
look, it's good company to be
in. Look, I already outed myself. We can move past it.
No.
All right.
Well, okay. I gotta throw one more thing in there. If Matthew Stafford knocked on your door and both teams are like, okay, we can do this, and we're going to get over the rivalry bit. We can deal with it. And instead of paying Brock Purdy that top dollar, quote unquote, and you give it to Stafford, who instead is looking for quote unquote top dollar, what are you doing?
Money wise, no, hell no. But I think Stafford's a better quarterback right now, and probably for the last few years. They're very close to trading for him in 2020. I mean, it was right there. If it weren't for like the Trey Lance trade, I think we could have seen Stafford with the Niners. There's just a few things that didn't work out. I think Stafford could probably get you to the Super Bowl this year, right? He's a better quarterback than Purdy, and he proved last year. He still has a lot in the tank, but I'm not paying him $55 million. I'm sorry.
No.
For me, I think he has 1 year left in the tank of like high-level production. Nah.
Yeah, I don't think he's got much left. I think he's I feel like there's something shady going on with that. Like there's no way
goods.
Like, is he really asking for that much money? I don't know. I feel like he's more grounded as a human than that. At least he's always struck me as such. But hey, at the end of the day, if he gave you the best shot to win a Super Bowl this year, maybe next year, and it doesn't require you,
I'll concede he's the better quarterback. But
no, yeah, it's not even that argument. It's just kind of what the Rams did. It's kind of what the Rams did in their situation. They felt like they needed that extra push to get over that hump. They won that one Super Bowl, and they were able to rebuild fast. So, I think
to an extent.
Yeah. Just like 5 years later, and he's like,
it's easy to say after we struck out on the Trey Lance trade, but things could have worked out differently.
Fair enough. I'll stop crying at him.
Leave him alone.
We'll move on because I know we started talking about coaches a little bit. The promotion of Clay Kubiak to offensive coordinator. How do you think that will play into the offense? I mean, obviously he's been there, so it's not like there's going to be some sort of learning curve of any capacity, but that's a big move. I know Brian Greasy departed as well.
Yeah.
These rotating pieces, what do you think for Brock in the offense? How does that change things if it does at all?
I mean, with Kubiak at the press conference where they announced that, Shanahan basically said he's going to be continuing what he's been doing for the last few years. So they're just giving him a pay raise, right? So it's more we want to keep him around before another team snags him as an OC. And they did the same thing with Mike McDaniel back in the day. So that probably speaks to how high they are on Clay Kubiak. But I don't think it'll make a major difference in how they're operating. In terms of the Greasy thing, So yeah, in terms of the Greasy thing, he's departing from football, so it is what it is, right? They brought in Nick Lombardi. He's got some deep ties. I think he's with the team in 2014 under Harbaugh, and he's coached for a few years since then. So it's not that big of a deal, I don't think.
Yeah, but like, yeah, especially when you have someone like Shanahan, like you're never really all that worried about who's the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
It kind of just comes down to like the defensive coordinator because that's just not his game. So yeah, like what he was saying before, like if it's the guy with if he's keeping the same role and just getting a pay raise, like I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Like I mean, he's had quarterbacks much worse than Purdy be successful in his system. So yeah, that's not even like a slight.
With the OC thing, they do it's just to protect these guys from being hired. They didn't do it with Bobby Slowick a few years ago. He ended up getting poached right away. And Mike LaFleur in New York. So it's just insurance, really.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of good experienced guys on staff. Chris Forrester, he just got a promotion, assistant head coach. He's probably the most underrated coach on the staff. He runs the run game. Had some issues in Miami back in the day, so he'll probably be around for a while.
Yeah, that's good. I kind of figured that. I just thought it was an interesting tidbit because I saw people pretty upset with Greasy's departure. At least I felt like that was the vibe. I think no one really knew what happened either.
The thing with Greasy is they've given him a lot of credit. He was the guy who kind of found Purdy, got him on their radar. So that's sort of his legacy, right? And you don't want to let that guy go as a fan, but it isn't like he's the one departing. It is what it is.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, that we'll speak to more of the offensive rotating pieces. Deebo Samuel was obviously and has been another huge talking point, and I mean he's as good as gone. I don't think he will be returning. Neither side. I think both sides are on good terms, but they're ready to call it quits. Where does Deebo go? What kind of compensation does he field? Austin, what did you have in mind?
This is hard. I mean, it felt like the same thing last year with Ayuk too, where like it felt like he was a Pittsburgh Steeler. Like people were like already getting their jerseys, and he just decided not to. Or they decided not to at the last second. But it does feel a little bit more real with him. I don't think his market would quite field what Ayuk was going to field at all at this point in Deebo's career. From everything I've kind of read up on, it feels like anywhere from a third to a fifth is kind of what we're looking at. Kind of depends on who's asking and what else the Niners are willing to throw in there. I've heard a few teams being thrown around. Washington's one that has, I think, like two or three receivers left on contract after this season who are desperately going to need a presence out the slot, kind of a more versatile piece. Pittsburgh's another one that tried getting Ayuk last year. They still really need a slot, so Deebo's still in their market. But I do really like him in Washington. I don't know if I'm them, I'm giving up like that around fourth round pick to get him, but yeah, I think that could be worth it for a handful of teams.
Yeah, I mean, with Deebo, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut, honestly, with that contract. And obviously, he's struggled with the hamstring injuries for a few years now. It seems like it's trending that way. They might be able to net a fifth if there's a few teams interested, but I really wouldn't be surprised if he's a cut. I think in terms of teams, Denver's been a big one that a lot of people have been talking about. He's expressed some interest in going there publicly. And so I can see him being a great fit there, honestly, in Sean Payton's offense. It just comes down to whether you can stay healthy.
Yeah, I thought about Denver. Pittsburgh and Washington were both on my list too. I feel like Deebo could kind of be the better Diami Brown in a way. I think Diami Brown is probably better down the field, but in terms of what they can use versatility-wise in that offense, Deebo is obviously the best guy to do that. And another team that came to my mind was Jacksonville. I know I talked about Deebo or Cooper Kupp going to Jacksonville too, but I thought about it and the way Cohen utilized Bucky Irving with yards after catch, I thought that was pretty unique. Like I didn't strike Bucky as that kind of player through the air at least, and he found ways to get the ball to him on all sorts of screens. And I think Deebo could potentially be revived if Liam Cohen gets his hands on him. So I thought that was potentially an interesting fit. But yeah, I think a fifth round pick was probably what I was also thinking. Like any team would be insane, I think, to send a third at this stage of the game.
No, he's not netting a third. I think with Washington, the connection there is Adam Peters being their GM. He was with the Niners for many years and drafted Deebo. So I can see that coming into play, but I'm not sure he ends up netting a trade package.
No, yeah. I mean, especially if there's talks of them getting cut. I think some teams would probably be willing to just kind of let that happen and hope they can scoop him up, rather than having to actually
be doing right by him as well. So
yeah, and they just I mean, he's been a good player for them and one of the most important players on their team the last few years. It's just like who he is now for what they're trying to be here soon. It's just it doesn't meet in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I've defended Deebo for years, even up to this year. I still think Deebo's a solid player. When he returned, he returned a lot of kicks this year, which was he hadn't done that in previous years. He was getting 30 yards a return. Like you can still see the explosiveness as a ball carrier. He's just not really. He's proven he's not really a great receiver, and he doesn't want to take touches in the backfield anymore, which was one of his biggest assets in 2021 when he was. I mean, I tweeted this morning that was the greatest football player alive.
That guy was a fucking. That guy was a monster.
Ridiculous.
I remember. I'll never forget that Rams. Was that 2021 the one against the Rams?
Yeah.
That was
oh my god. So the one against Jalen Ramsey.
Yes.
Just random over. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Deebo being out the door, I still feel like I was reading about some rumblings of Brandon Ayuk still being in trade rumors too. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that.
So I think I've historically been higher on Ayuk than a lot of people. And I think even still after he had like a pretty bad stretch of games, I still do think that that just kind of came from him being a little rusty. I think he was in his own head a lot from having a full off season of trade talks. So I think that he should stay a 49er, especially if it seems like Deebo's out the window. I think this is a really good opportunity for him to prove that he is like a true wide receiver one in the NFL. And I think that he can just be a really bigger, higher volume player in this offense. So I think that he should stay. I think this offense is really good for him.
Yeah, I mean, I saw those reports. It wasn't. They said their team's still offering, but that the Niners weren't really willing to move off of him. So I wouldn't look into it too much. He wasn't great last year. He had a few bad drops and wasn't really productive. But he's still a great player. He was very good in 2023, 2022. One of the best route runners in the league. I think there's a chance he doesn't live up to the contract, but I wouldn't get down on him yet.
Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't. I'm far from getting down on him. It just was interesting to think about, with the Purdy contract coming up and feeling like their backs are up against the wall with some other places on the roster, and him obviously the extension he got last year was pretty substantial. And the receiver room is probably one of the areas on the team they have not much to worry about, even without Ayuk. No. I mean, they have depth there, and I think really anybody, I feel like a lot of guys that they could bring in there would work. I mean, Ayuk does a fantastic job individually, but I think there are a lot of different guys, schematically speaking, that could work in the Kyle Shanahan offense. So
I mean, Jawan Jennings, even this year, was just under 1,000 yards. He would have hit 1,000 yards if he didn't get ejected in the last game. He's one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Great run blocker, physical, tall guy. So they've got him there. Ricky Pearsall hopefully can come into his own with the full offseason and start to the season. So, yeah, I don't think there's much to be concerned about there.
Not at all. No, it makes it a lot easier to move on from one of either Deebo or Ayuk. But yeah, like you were saying before, I think they're just rumblings. I mean, people talked about Gronk coming back, and then he immediately says that's not happening. So I think theirs doesn't quite hold as much water as the Deebo talks do.
Yeah. Well, the Deebo talks, the team even today just said we're going to do right by him. We're probably going to move him. So.
Yeah, I think that guy's gone. I was just thinking, speaking of Denver, though, because I was thinking if in the case Ayuk was actually traded, I thought Ayuk to Denver would actually be a pretty good fit too. I feel like they need somebody over the middle, and I know tight end has been something that they've talked about needing. I know Sean Payton claimed he's looking for a workhorse, even though he's just going to draft another guy to throw in a 4-guy rotation anyway. I think Brandon Ayuk could be a good option for Denver if they really were shopping him, but they're not. So we'll go on to, at some point we'll get into the draft, but I feel like there are almost every spot that's not tight end, there are questions with this team, or at least headlines to address. And the offensive line probably being the biggest one. I mean, this unit is there's a lot of holes, a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah.
So Trent Williams.
And it's hard because I think a lot of it falls on a guy that's still there, and that's Trent Williams, who it sounds like he's good to go for 2025, 2026. So I mean, the most important offensive line positions taken care of. Dominic Cooney was a freaking monster last year, so that part's taken care of. For the time being, Colton McKivitz, I feel good for now. I think he is. I think he is a replacement level player, absolutely. Maybe. But I think of all the other free agent spots, I feel like they need to attack pass rusher. They'll probably have to attack corner, D line if Hargrave's gone. So I feel like he can hold his own for the time being, and then they can work on that eventually. Brendel, he's another replacement level starter, but I'm not too worried. I'm more intrigued about finding Trent Williams' replacement.
I think that'll be prioritized in the draft. In terms of free agency, they'll look at left guard. I think Aaron Banks is on the way out.
He's gone.
I think his contract's expiring this year. They probably don't have enough money to bring him back. Jake Brendel, you could look to replace him. There were talks that they're interested in Drew Dahlman from the Falcons. That would be an instant upgrade. And I'm sure that the guy from the Rams who just hit the trade market, Jonah Williams, he could be in the play. But I think McKivitz will be back for another year. He's not very good. I've never really been a big fan of him, but he was better last year than he was the year before. And I think if he plays at that level, you're not complaining too much. Obviously, Pooney, I think you have your starter for the next 4 years at least. So I think they'll go into the draft and look for a left tackle to eventually succeed Trent Williams, maybe be plugged in at right tackle immediately. And then you can also look at center and free agency or draft.
Yeah. I thought McKivitz out of the three spots was probably the one that was the safest.
Yeah.
If you will.
They extended him pretty recently.
Yeah. So I think McKivitz is the least of the concerns. I personally think Brendel needs to be replaced. I think there were the Drew Dahlman conversations going around, but I think if there was one position on the offensive line that needs to be addressed the most in free agency, it's that. I think they can figure out their other guard spot. They just re-signed Barch today. I believe it was today. He's all right. He could be a guy to compete. They have another guy they drafted 2 years ago. I can't pronounce his last name.
Jalen Moore. Or?
Nick
College. Yeah, he's like a bubble player. I don't really.
Yeah.
He can play tackle. He played tackle in college. So
yeah,
I think it'll be interesting to see what they do because center is a very hard position to kind of find a guy who fits in Kyle Shanahan's offense. They tried with Weston Richburg at the start of his run, and he ended up getting injured, retired. They found Alex Mack. He was very good for a year and then retired. And then Brendelis guy, he was okay to start. I think he made a Pro Bowl in his first year starting, but he's really just an average player.
Yeah. It's just with this type of offense, we know Shanahan can make a lot of guys work under center. That's kind of his superpower. And being how I feel about Brock, at least, I think this would be the area of the offense that needs to be prioritized. I feel like you can't cheap out on the offensive line when Kyle Shanahan's superpower is making the limited quarterback work. So I'm afraid that they do go that route because this past season, I mean, the offensive line was a big concern, was a big problem. And if they kind of try to run it back with what they have and they don't attack center and free agency as hard, or maybe I feel like at 11 they might end up trading out because I feel like just if they're looking for offensive line, I think there will be other best player available options they won't be able to pass up. So they might, do they go offensive line there? I'm just worried about their plan of attack up front because it needs to be prioritized, and I don't know if it will be.
I mean, historically, Kyle Shanahan, as the Niners coach, hasn't really addressed the interior offensive line as much. He's put money into the tackles. He drafted Mike McGlinchey in the top 10 or top 15 in 2018. So I think tackle will be addressed for the future, but I'm not sure about guard. They'll replace Aaron Banks, but that's about it. I'm not sure Brendel goes.
Yeah, we'll see. It's just something that after watching last year, I know you mentioned Brock was a lot more mobile, and I think that was because he had to be more often than not. So we'll see how that group up front turns out. But I guess on that note, we could talk about the draft too, get into that a little bit, because at the 11th overall selection, this is a team that could easily trade back, I think, from that position. So where do you think they're going to be targeting Austin at 11 if they're not moving out?
It depends who's there, because 11 is one where like you can kind of go best player available, especially when you have so many free agent positions that are kind of up in the air at this point. I've heard a lot about Will Johnson falling to 11 somehow. I don't quite think that happens, but I would love that if Charvarius Ward's gone. I do really like Josh Simmons. He's my favorite offensive tackle in the draft, but he's hurt. So I think that if you have someone like Trent Williams that can kind of keep that left tackle spot good for the next year, let Josh Simmons get back to 100% and then take over, I really like him in that 11 spot.
Yeah, I mean, Simmons is a good player. Obviously, with the injury, I'm not sure he'll be taken in the top 20 or so.
Probably not.
But I'm also not sure he's a great scheme fit as well at tackle. I think if it were up to me, I would trade that pick for Myles Garrett. But
yeah.
I'm not sure the Browns would agree to that. I do genuinely think the Niners will make a big push for either Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. I saw Jonathan Allen just at the trade market. So I think they will try to address defensive line there one way or another, whether it be through trade or pick. My guy would be Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. I think you take the blue chip athlete and you hope it works out.
Yeah, we'll see. It definitely. You mentioned defensive line, and that was another avenue that we of course are going to explore. But they've kind of been band-aiding that spot opposite of Nick Bosa every year.
It was a hard watch this year, especially the run defense. It just they can stop anything on the ground, and I think they have to address edge in the first round. I think there's a lot of great edges in this class that you can't pass up on. But I do think they'll address defensive tackle in free agency.
Yeah, that's fair. See. I mean, I watched a little bit of Leonard Floyd film a little bit, and it was like you said, a really hard watch. So like I think going after that archetype of these like 245 pound lean edge rushers, I don't think that really fits what they're looking for. So going after a guy like Stewart, a guy like Michael Williams, that would be just massive long athletes that you can hope to be good pass rushers someday, but for now they're elite run defenders at like 21 years old. You still have Nick Bosa, I do like them. What's that?
With Stewart, he reminds me a lot of Eric Armstead, who I feel like the Niners have missed a ton over the last 3 years. I mean, early on, I think you could put him in the inside for passing downs and have him on the edge for early first and second downs, and then see from there if he can develop as a pass rusher. And I mean, with his athletic traits, obviously the sack production wasn't there, and a lot of people are kind of skeptical about that, but I'm not concerned at all there. I think, especially with Robert Salavak, he can make that work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, sack production is weird in college. It always is. It depends on the scheme. It depends on the college. There's some colleges that produce 15 sack guys every year. Georgia seems to produce 5 sack guys every year, and then they turn into 10 sack guys in the NFL. A&M's the same way, so I'm not that worried about it.
A&M, you could say the same thing about the other edge rusher, Scarton. So the exact same things, really. Obviously not to the extent of Stewart, but there's clearly some coaching issues there, some scheme issues. I wouldn't really put it on the player.
Yeah, I think edge rusher at 11. I felt like as I was running it through, that was probably the most likely result if they stick in that spot. But if they do move back, let's say. I mean, I was looking maybe who could jump up. I didn't feel too great about anybody wanting to move into that spot. But hypothetically, if they did move back to I think 18th, I think that's Seattle's pick, or just throwing out an early 20th selection, I think the 49ers would be a team to explore those scenarios before kind of forcing something into the 11th spot.
Yeah, I think corner could be in play there for sure if they move back. Same with offensive tackle. If Will Johnson ends up falling, as far as people say, that would be the runaway pick. But otherwise, there's not a ton of high-level corners in this class that I'm sure that I would take in the top 20 because Hunter will be off the board. Johnson will probably be off the board. I think you could end up looking at offensive tackle there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. As far as moving back. But for the defensive side of the ball, talking about these cornerbacks, I get the sense that Ward is gone. I don't know if you got that.
Yeah,
So
he said it.
yeah, I think he did right. He like physically can't be there, which is really sad.
Yeah.
So that leaves, I think, a potentially interesting defensive back room. I know their safeties, I think, are their safeties are inspiring. I mean, I like Hufanga. No mixed opinions.
I'm not sure Ufanga will be there next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets moved.
Yeah, so then
He's
it's
on an
Brown and
expiring
Mustafa,
contract.
right?
Yeah, Mustafa's very good. He was very good as a rookie. Brown,
Yeah,
not a great.
Mustafa's a monster. He was another one who's film.
Yeah.
I liked him a lot in college, and I kind of rewatched his film yesterday.
Yeah,
Dude, he hits like a truck.
He was phenomenal. Yeah, he's got great range. Brown is just kind of the opposite. He tries to be Mustafa, but it's just he's not very good in coverage. So I think they'll address safety in free agency. I have a few names that have been attached to Salah. It's Ashton Davis as a free agent, and Jordan Whitehead just today is going to go into free agency. So I think between those two guys, you can definitely see them making a push. And I could see Hufanga being moved for sure.
Yeah, he's one. It felt like everyone kind of seems to think that Greenlaw is just going to get paid more to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
everyone's talking like Hargrave is just not going to be a 49er, and there's no way about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I think
Hargrave will get cut, but there were talks that they might try to bring him back on a reduced price. So we'll see. Okay. He's pretty bad. Just you can't play him on running downs, which is tough for his contract.
Is there anyone like that you do feel optimistic that like you do think you have a chance to bring back this year?
I mean, I think they'll make a good offer to Greenlaw. I would love to have him back. He's a beast when he's healthy. They already extended Lenore. That was a massive one. I think he was the biggest name that they need to get back. Otherwise, I think Banks is kind of out of the picture.
Okay.
Hufanga, maybe if it's on a reduced price. Obviously, he's been injured for the last 2 years. And I think Mason will get tendered. I'm not sure. If another team does pay him, which I think is unlikely, I don't think they'll match, but I think Mason will probably come back.
Yeah, and then I think did they already re-sign Evan Anderson the next year?
They did. They gave him a contract in the year. I don't remember what it was. He was quite good for a UDFA.
Yeah, I was a big fan of him. Like,
he was on my radar coming out of the draft. I was surprised they got him as after the draft.
As a UDFA, that was a fantastic pickup. And then to re-sign him, I think they did. I had that written down. Might have been wrong, but
I know there was something with this contract.
Yeah, UDFAs are weird with how their contracts work, but I mean, for him to kind of fill in, I don't know if he's like a full-time starter necessarily, but like I do love him as like a rotational, like 350-pound nose tackle.
Yeah, that's what we really needed last year, some meat up there, because Hargrave is quite small for a defensive tackle, and that it really showed when he was out there and they were running it just down the middle every time.
Yeah,
Kevin Givens is the same way, although he was a bit better, high motor. So
I don't think I watched enough of him. I watched some Malik Collins though. Also was not inspired by the run defense there. So that whole room, the edge and D tackle, is gonna need some like serious run defense reform. Yeah. It feels like you were saying before.
Yeah, but I mean, between the free agents, I think they'll probably let a lot of these guys walk. The RFAs, some of them will get tendered, but we'll just have to see there. And I think they'll restructure quite a few contracts as well. They do it every year. I think Warner would be the one to get restructured this year just to clear up a bit of cap.
That would be smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like Austin was kind of saying, and you kind of are confirming, it just doesn't feel like they're trying to really retain a lot of guys. And with a big contract coming up for Brock, I mean, that makes sense. And I was trying to project, their outlook for 2025 and this whole like reload versus rebuild kind of mindset that I was entering it with. Like, I think it kind of balances in the middle, but fans, organization alike, they're going to want to be reloading and trying to fire back to being a Super Bowl contender. Are they going to be a top team in the NFC? And by top team, I don't mean a Minnesota Vikings like regular season, 14-3. I mean like a genuine NFC heavyweight.
At full health, I don't see why not, right? There's the talent there. We've seen all of these guys produce at a high level in the last 2-3 years, right? 2023, 2022. Deebo's obviously gone, but really watching him last year, is that big of a loss? So Yeah, I think if Pearsall can take a big step at receiver, they can kind of work around the offensive line issues, make it work for a year. I don't see why they wouldn't be in the NFC Championship debate at least.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you see teams that kind of were like the
Yeah.
Rams, for example, who are starting to feel like they're on the decline. The entire NFC feels pretty wide open besides the Eagles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I can't see why with a fully healthy Purdy, hopefully a fully healthy McCaffrey, you have Trent Williams back, you have still a good receiver room. Like, if we can just kind of reload some of these missing free agents with guys of pretty similar caliber, I don't see why not. At least
have you seen their schedule for next year?
No, I've not.
It's very it's like a losing schedule. Obviously, it's very, very easy. At least looking into it. Obviously, a lot of these teams are going to get better, but it's like a cupcake schedule right now.
Yeah, so, I mean, that just kind of even confirms it a little bit more. Like, it's not that different of a team that's had success the last 5 years outside of a few rotational players. So, I mean, they have the same core. They still have Fred Warner. Like, they still have all these monsters that have kind of ran the team the last few years. So, yeah, I feel good about them.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just with Kyle Shanahan, it's kind of always been boom or bust. And I know the busts have been for different reasons, like the quarterbacks hurt or just not being good have played a big factor into that. But even, I mean, last year there was a lot that happened in and out of their control. And I mean, that wasn't just a bad year. Like, I would consider that a bust of a season for
relative to expectations. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, but like that happens to like every or most, we call them dynasties. Like every team that's found success in the last 5-10 years has had these kind of bad years where your stars get hurt, and then that kind of just leads to turmoil off the field. Like, it's just a wash of a season per your expectations, and then you can just kind of reload, rebuild, and go into the next year.
Yeah, and they've shown before 2 times now that they can bounce back from disastrous seasons and end up going to the Super Bowl, or NFC Championship, I think the other one. But yeah, I'm not too concerned. I think it'll be interesting. If they have 2 bad years in a row again, we can have discussions about Shanahan, but it hasn't happened yet, and I don't think it'll happen this year. I think they'll at least be competitive in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think Shanahan's had is it back-to-back losing seasons, or is it just
2017, 2018. That was it though. And Jimmy G got injured. So
yeah.
At least in my lifetime, I don't think the 49ers have ever lost a playoff game that wasn't an NFC Championship or a Super Bowl.
Oh wow.
So this would be the first.
Wow. Yeah, well, they're a team that like Dawson's point too, the NFC's wide open. So there's optimism whether you're the Niners or you're the Rams, if they can somehow retain Stafford, or if you're the Packers. Like, feels like anybody is contending in that conference. So that's playing to their benefit. It just will be, I think this year will be the last year of what feels like the 49ers, because after this, without Trent, McCaffrey's, who knows what's going to happen with McCaffrey. Like, there are a lot of these big names that have been household for them, or at least have become integral, that it's going to become team building again.
I feel like we've been saying that for a few years now. So I feel like every year it's kind of like it has to end now, right? Like, they're going to the Trey Lance era, Jimmy G's getting injured, and they just find a way. So
I think they've done a really good job of getting players that play to like their scheme, like that they play to like the Shanahan way.
For sure.
So like even if it's like almost like a fully different personnel group, like it kind of just feels like the same 49er team over and over and over again, which is a compliment. Considering how many times they win.
There's so many teams around the league running similar systems now, so you just kind of pull players from there, which they have in previous years.
Yeah, right.
No, that's a fair point too, because everyone's it's a copycat league. So and obviously the Shanahan tree is probably the biggest one that's growing currently. So that's a fair point too. So it'll be interesting. The Niners are going to be on my list of teams that I'm going to be paying closer attention to for reasons that I feel like I've harped on enough. But
tragic.
But hey, I think that was about all I had regarding San Francisco. I mean, I think we covered an outlook for next year, the draft, free agents, cut candidates. I feel like we've touched almost every corner that we could for San Francisco. So if you guys have any closing thoughts, any last remarks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we went over just about everything with the draft. Again, I'll make it clear. I'd prefer trading the pick for Myles Garrett or Max Crosby if they're available. And I think the Niners are the most realistic situation for either of those guys to end up in if they do get traded. So, yeah, we'll have to see.
Oh, I was thinking back here. Yeah,
I thought you were good. But yeah,
no,
I was gonna. I mean, I never really even considered. And not because I don't think it could happen, but in terms of teams that would trade for Myles Garrett, for some reason, the Niners just have not come to my mind. And
same.
I don't know if that's because it just doesn't feel like they would do something like that. Maybe that's what it is.
They've been quite aggressive. And I mean, they did the Chase Young deal just 2 years ago now. They made a strong offer for Khalil Mack back. And they've been quite aggressive when it comes to these edge guys. They just haven't always gotten them. So I do think this year, especially when you're picking 11th in a fairly weak class where you might not be able to address any immediate needs, I think this would be the year to move it.
Yeah. That's true. I wonder if that'll be enough. The 11th. I mean,
no, obviously not the pick alone, but
right.
You traded 3 firsts for Trey Lance. I think you can move a little for Myles Garrett.
Yeah. Like it works too, because I mean they also gave up on arm and a leg for McCaffrey, and he was one of the best players in football for
exactly. That deal really, it was second and a fourth, I think. Really not that bad.
No, I mean, yeah. So but it just kind of shows like an urgency to get players that they want on their team. Yeah. So it almost felt too good to be true, I guess, which is why I never thought like Myles Garrett would go there. Like just having him and Nick Bosa would be like disgusting to watch. So.
Yeah,
especially with all the holes they have. But I feel confident with how well they've done rebuilding and retooling their team time and time again the last decade. That I think they'll do it again. So all things considered, I feel really optimistic about San Francisco in 2025.
Is Elijah Mitchell alive? Do you have any idea?
He's a free agent. I do know that.
He got injured in the preseason. I don't think he'll be back. Elijah Mitchell, he's a decent player, right? He was very good as a rookie. I think he had like damn near 1,000 yards in like 12 games or something. But his vision isn't great, and it's kind of kept him off the field. There's not really, and he doesn't pass block, so there's not really a reason to have him on the field over Jordan Mason now or Guerrero next year. It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate because I think he could be good. I think he'll end up on maybe the Dolphins, one of the Texans, one of those Shanahan tree teams, and he'll probably be a good player.
Yeah, I just had to ask because I like Elijah Mitchell. Yeah, you just kind of forget one of the many Niners running backs that was good at some point and then just kind of fell off the earth.
Yeah, this him and Matt Breida. I'll never forget.
We brought him back this year. He was with the team for training camp, and then I don't think he made the team.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of running. Trey Sermon, legends.
Oh yeah.
Ty Davis Price. You go on.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
that was an error.
That was like a 3rd round pick, wasn't it?
Yeah, both of them.
Oh wow.
Tragic.
Well, that I think will sum it up. So definitely be sure to check out Karan. I'm sorry, I keep Karan's social media is down in the description below. And like I said at the start of the show, one of the best follows that I have, and that's why I reached out to him to hop on the pod. So thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to get the QB model back. I've just been working on the receivers as well. We'll try to get them out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Be sure to check out the work he does. Be sure you're checking out all of our social medias as well. Against the Blitz, all of the links will be in the description. Our individual socials will be in the description as always. But we will see you guys in episode 15.